Well, hello, and welcome to yet another exciting episode of God. I have no idea what's about to happen. Think of it as a comment section, but without Bryan with a Y. And the reason he's not here is because I didn't invite him. And the reason I didn't invite him is because this is a holiday weekend. And frankly, I suspect he has a life greater than mine. Today, my life revolves around watching my new puppy and making sure he doesn't eat up my new cords. So I just wanted to talk about some of the comments that I have seen, some of the comments that maybe deserve a second look, maybe some that deserve a little bit more comment than I've had time to give it, and maybe some that I think deserve a little bit more comment from the commentariat. I just wanted to point out for those who don't get to read the comments. But I found this to be an interesting 300 posts or so, and so I just wanted to pull out a few of them for closer inspection. Here we go. So Peter, he was the first one to make a comment, and he actually made his comment while we were recording the show. How is that possible? Because I put the blog up before I recorded the show, and so Peter just jumped right in, and we got a chance to address some of his comment on the blog. He thanked me for the blog post. You're welcome. And he wanted to know if I thought that. Let me see. Can I clarify? Do you not believe a figure called Jesus with some followers existed at all, or that he may have existed, but that he is unlikely to have said or done the things ascribed to him, so forth? So I read this comment before, and this falls under the category of mythicism incredulity. And you might even just broaden the category and call it Christian incredulity. They just can't believe that someone could really think the opposite of what they think. And it doesn't make sense to them. It does not compute. I have been there, and I understand the mindset of it does not compute. By the way, I can't bother to look this up. Will someone please tell me, is it incredulity when they can't believe it, or credulity? I think credulity is when you believe too much, and it's incredulity when you don't believe it, but I might have that backwards. Yeah, someone fix me on that. But there are this conversation. The only reason I'm bringing up this post again is because the first part of the conversation really lived in this place of incredulity and just trying to basically say, are you really a mythicist? Is mythicism really a thing, or can I ascribe to your beliefs something more rational? No, mythicism really is a thing. Furthermore, it's rational. I certainly argue that it is rational. And so there are a lot of things, though, that Christians, they never really address mythicism and mythicism by and large, because they never encounter it. They don't encounter it in a church. Christians don't spend an awful lot of time talking to atheists on the bus, things like that. And I think most Christians, by and large, don't spend a lot of time on the internet talking to atheists either. They have absolutely no idea what current thought is on these things. So, so the conversation does kind of go on, and it gets into incredulity over a number of matters. So, just trying to pull out one or two of these because there are a lot of comments to get through. The biggest evidence for the existence of someone who said and did some things worth following is, I think, the behavior of the disciples. Okay, so Peter gets into some of the reasons why he thinks that Jesus is real. But really, if you kind of reverse engineer this, what he's really saying is, I can't imagine certain things would be the case if he wasn't real. And so it's really a way of extending this incredulity, this argument from incredulity. So in this case, he's saying, well, the disciples, they did things that wouldn't make sense if Jesus wasn't a real person. And just to kind of steel man this argument from Peter, the traditional form of this argument is not that Jesus must exist because the disciples did things. It's that the disciples would not have willingly died for a lie, which is to say they wouldn't have died for something that they knew was a lie. So if they were just making Jesus up, and then someone came to them with an offer of life or death, life if you just tell the truth, and death if you keep lying about this, they would tell the truth and choose life and go on their way. But you see, this argument assumes a lot of things that, once again, you're just taking on faith. You don't actually have any evidence for. So, first of all, we have no idea how many disciples of Jesus supposedly there were. I mean, I know that there's the whole 12, the idea of the 12, this sacred magic number. But even when the New Testament, the gospel writers list out the 12, it's not the same guys. It's not the same names on the lists. And it's not just explained by, this language or that language. So they can't agree on who the 12 are supposed to be. So not only do you not know how they died, you don't even know who they were. But secondly, you don't know how they died. 2 words, Candida Moss. Look her up, read her work. I have good stuff. She talks about the myth of martyrdom. And it's not so much an argument that followers of Jesus couldn't have been martyred, but that the stories are blown out of proportion and many are just flat out made up. And so what she's really arguing is that we can't know not only who the disciples were, we can't know how they died. It is just pious fiction that they all died a martyr's death. So if you're saying, well, they wouldn't have martyred themselves for something they knew was a lie, you don't know that they martyred themselves at all. You have no idea. In some of the stories that we have, we can pretty much say fairly conclusively are just flat out made up stories. Once again, just pious fictions to tell a kind of a hero's narrative, if you will. And for Christians at this time, being a martyr was kind of a big deal. And so it meant, if you were martyred for a cause, first of all, not only are you high up on the org chart and, you could maybe be considered a saint, but that it proved that what you lived for was true because you didn't just live for it, you died for it. And so it's this kind of a backward rationale in the same way that Christians kind of celebrated suffering. Well, look at that person. He's suffering so much. He must be pious. Look, he's living in poverty. He's got nothing but rags. He's got no shoes on his feet. He didn't bring an extra coat. Look at how pious he is. Look at how strong his faith is. And so there was kind of the same idea about martyrdom as well, just a general suffering. It's just kind of that idea to its logical conclusion. But once again, you don't know that these guys were martyred. If martyred, you have no idea that they had any possibility to recant. Furthermore, you don't know that they didn't recant. You don't know that they didn't tuck tail and run, and when caught, recant. Maybe their heads were cut off anyway because they had caused so much trouble. You see, it would not have mattered I think, to the Roman Empire, whether they recanted or not, because they would have been criminals. And so, if you're a criminal and you say, yeah, I'm sorry, I caused a little bit of an uprising there. My bad, oopsie, that doesn't get you off. So this kind of credulity that the disciples' behavior is just inexplicable if they knew that they were, dying for a fraud. Just assumes that something about the disciples' behavior that, historically speaking, you can't possibly know. The only thing you can know is what's written in the Bible and what might have been made up by people committing pious fraud. So you actually don't know that these people died a martyr's death, and if they died, that they had any chance of recanting, and if they had a chance, whether they actually did recant. So you just have a faith position on that. It's not an argument. So this is an incredulity fail for the Christians. Let's see. I've spent probably more time on this one than I wanted to. It seems like there was something else in the incredulity category that I wanted to pull out here. Yes. We have all these writings, all these attestations for Jesus. Surely we wouldn't have so many independent attestations for somebody who wasn't real, someone who didn't show up in history at all. So surely, right? Well, you know what? We've got more independent attestations for King Arthur than we do for Jesus. And I don't think that we have any way of knowing if King Arthur was real. So I don't think the number of attestations is relevant, because after a certain point, all you had are stories. You didn't have any possibility of eyewitnesses. You just had stories and people repeating stories. And so if you have 1,000 people repeating stories about a thing that they could not have witnessed or known existed, it doesn't matter how many of those stories you have. Now what you might show is a strong appetite for people at a particular time to believe something, and that's fine. There might have been a strong appetite to believe in something like a Jesus. I have no problem with that. But the number of attestations do not, in fact, speak to the historicity of Jesus unless those attestations were high-quality attestations. And what makes a high-quality attestation? Well, first-person eyewitness would make a high-quality attestation. Contemporary writing would make a high-quality attestation, certainly a higher quality attestation. An official writing, such as a birth record, death record, court record, that would make for a high-quality attestation. But if what you have are the attestations from believers from 100 years or more after the fact, you don't have any high-quality attestations. You just have a lot of people who really liked a story and they wrote about it a lot. That's not an attestation. You should stop that. And for to the extent that historians use this criteria, well, I think that what you largely have are Christian historians kind of abusing a historical criteria. Attestations are important, but the quality of attestations are far more important than the number of attestations. Because once again, if you just multiply a bunch of stories of people who would not have known the facts, you haven't really shown anything more than an appetite for a story. And so your idea that, you have all these attestations and you can't imagine how, a non-real person would have so many attestations, just is logically fallacious. And it's also fallacious from a historical criteria perspective. But I think it's fallacious on another level too, because you don't actually have a bunch of attestations. So one of the things that I pointed out is that, in something that all mythicists point out, is that you don't actually have the number of attestations that Christians claim you have. So they count Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as 4 independent accounts of the record of Jesus. They are not. They might be 2.5, but Mark is the basis for all of it. And it's possible that Mark had a source too. So, but Mark is the basis. 90% of Mark is found in Matthew. This does not happen by accident. Sorry. And real historians simply wouldn't copy to this degree. This is absurd. And then another ridiculous amount of Mark and Matthew are found in Luke. This is why these are called the Synoptic Gospels. They share way more DNA than independent historical accounts would share, often word for word copying. Now, it's also interesting the places where they chose not to copy each other, the places where they had their own story to tell. So that's also interesting too. But just from a textual critical perspective, there's way too much shared information between these 3 books to call them 3 individual attestations. They are not from a historical perspective. Now, you might say that John, that's a completely different story. I would argue it's not. It's not actually all that. It's still based on. It's still based on the basic structure and story of Mark, but it's kind of like if you go to a comic book series like Batman, say. Batman has a lot of different origin stories. In fact, all of the major comics have lots of different origin stories, okay? And so you can find multiple origin stories for Batman. Does that mean that they're individual attestations of Batman? No, they're not. They're all riffing on the same idea, okay? But they each have a different way of telling it. They each have some different details that they want to bring out. They each have a different story to tell. That doesn't mean that they each independently came up with Batman. They did not. Okay, so let's maybe put that one to bed. The next conversation that I want to bring up is the conversation. It's not necessarily the order that came up in. It was a conversation I had with Magatak largely about a claim that I made. So I just want to make the claim again. The Apostle Paul does not quote Jesus. There's no place in Paul's writings where he says, and according to Jesus, or we're having this problem, and we're having this problem in the church. You people don't understand, as Jesus said on the sermon in the Sermon on the Mount, blah. He never says anything like that during times that it would have mattered. Now, I got some pushback, and Magatak put forth a list of passages, and he says, "You're just factually wrong. Look at this." Well, Magatak, I'm not stupid, okay? I'm just going to make this statement and go out on a limb. I know the Bible way better than you. So I appreciate your enthusiasm. You did not sidetrack me or sideswipe me with any of the things that you brought up. So this is the kind of thing that you will see on forums throughout the internet. It wouldn't surprise me if Magatak didn't just go to Google and look it up and just copied and pasted some of the stuff that I've seen online. So first of all, I'm not the first person to make this observation. Okay, smarter people than me have made this observation. None of us are stupid. It's not like we missed those things. It's not like you gave those examples and we said, "Oh golly, I wish, I wish I'd been more careful." That's not actually what's going on here, guys. So I just want to explain very briefly. I don't want to take up too much time. You can actually go on the internet and look up debates for this if you like. But if you didn't have time to follow that conversation, yes, there are a few passages where the Christian can kind of push back and say, yeah, well, what about this? Oh, what about this? Well, what about this? And with each passage, there's a good response, and that's why the Christian keeps moving to the next one. Okay, well, what about this one then? They fall into just a couple of categories, and I'll just try to dismiss them quickly. The first category is Deuteropauline Writings. These don't count for a number of reasons. The main reason is that Paul didn't write them. I'm sorry about the audio clipping. I can see that I'm clipping a little bit. I'm here by myself talking to myself, and I'm yelling. I don't know why am I doing that? Let me stop doing that. Paul didn't write them. Oops, there it goes again. I'll just dial this back a little bit. I see that mine got a little bit hot there. Okay. Paul didn't write them. It's still clip. Anyway, so yeah, we're not counting Deuteropauline Writings, folks. And so stop pretending like Paul wrote all 14 of the books that you want to say he wrote, or all 13 if you want to sober up and acknowledge that Hebrew was not written by Paul. He didn't write them. He wrote definitely 6, probably 7 of the books. And you know which ones they are. And so these things that are, quote unquote, quotes from Jesus largely come in the category of the Deuteropauline. Now, if anything, that bolsters my claim. It doesn't hurt my claim. It bolsters my claim that the first thing you would go to are things that Paul didn't actually write. Furthermore, these Deuteropauline books were written around the time, if not sometime after the Gospels had been written. So they would have had some material for this by then. So no, that doesn't count. Sorry. The one that gets the most pushback is the Lord's Supper, 1 Corinthians, Lord's Supper. What is it? 1 Corinthians 12, 13, 14. I don't know. I don't care. I can't be bothered to look it up. But you know, for as I've received from the Lord, which also I've delivered unto you, that the Lord Jesus, the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread, yada, yada, yada. Okay. We can all quote that passage by heart, I'm sure. It's just like that. So I would be happy to count this. And in fact, other people would be happy to count this as something that Paul is getting from a Jesus tradition, except that Paul says he didn't get it from a Jesus tradition. He didn't get it from the apostles because they didn't have anything to teach him, according to Paul. He didn't get it from, common knowledge of the church. Heck, he didn't even get it from the scriptures, which is where he gets most of his stuff. What he says is, I received this from the Lord. So he's getting some kind of what he would call a direct communication from the Lord, as if this were somehow the only way to get this information. I would think that if this were something that was common knowledge that Christians were talking about, this is not how anyone would talk about getting it. So it would be like if I were to present a sermon, and I were to say to you something like, "As I'm receiving a direct message from God that I'm delivering now to you. You should love one another." And you might scratch your head and say, "Okay, well, that's a good message, love one another, but didn't we already have that one?" They would wonder what I was talking about. And so this is why the Lord's Supper passage isn't counted because Paul seems to be taking it out of consideration by telling us how he got it. And it wasn't from tradition. It wasn't something that was common knowledge. Heck, we assume that Paul taught the church, the Corinthian church, everything they knew. Well, you know what he didn't teach them? Apparently, was anything about the Lord's Supper. Because if he set that church up for success with the important institutions and such, they would have already known about the Lord's Supper. But apparently they did not. And so he has to give them this special revelation as received from the Lord. So that's not there. The other one, I want to say 1 Corinthians 9 about not muzzling the ox that treadeth the grain, that a minister is worthy of his hire. Yes, okay, this is something definitely put in the mouth of Jesus. Jesus says this. But let's just give Jesus his full reality, flesh and blood reality for a moment. Jesus is just quoting from the Old Testament. This is way old ancient wisdom. Jesus could have easily said, Confucius says, I should not tread a muzzle the ox that treads out the grain. This is common knowledge, a very common quote in something that has been a part of Jewish and otherwise popular culture for a very, very long time. Lots of people said it. This was not some original Jesusic quote. And so the idea that this is put into the mouth of Jesus later, I'm sorry, I don't count that. That doesn't actually count, because there are lots of things, once again, that are, I think everything is put in the mouth of Jesus because he didn't exist. But if what you're saying is Paul quoted Jesus when he said, love one another, well, I would say you don't really have much of an example. That's not a unique example. Lots of people said to love one another. And so to show that Paul was quoting Jesus by saying something like that is really weak sauce. And so that's why this argument stands, in my opinion, and the objections to it don't. Let me move on. There is more interesting stuff here. Give me a moment because I didn't take notes. Let's see. I'm looking at some of Lute's stuff right now. I think Lute does a pretty good job of speaking to himself. His conversations are pretty well fleshed out. I would bring up one of Darren Lute's points if I disagreed with him on something just to pick a fight. But as it happens, I don't. So, yeah. In fact, he and I end up saying a lot of the same things through this comment section. Okay, so one of the conversations that Lute and I are both in with Peter is about Paul. I'm going to save this stuff for Paul, though. Sorry, Lute. I blathered on too much earlier. So I want to we might get to some of this stuff later. I wanted to get to one from Andrew. And for that, I have to scroll down about 200 posts to get there. Hang on. Before I get there, Sarah, just a quick shout out. You just need one person for batshit crazy stuff. That's for sure, she says. By the way, she doesn't say batshit crazy. She says BSC. I used to do a show called BSC Weekly. BSC stands for batshit crazy. Okay? So I just give you the long form of that. But she brings up this delightful video of this end times preacher, Sharon Gilbert. And the headline is Gilbert says that an alien imitated her husband, and then it tried to have sex with her. It actually gets crazier from there. I'm going to stop you right there. Sharon, you're a mature lady, a handsome woman. I do you. I mean, I think it's perfectly reasonable that an alien would want to have sex with her. I don't I don't know what your problem is, Sarah. That doesn't seem batshit crazy at all. So okay, that's enough of that commercial break. I want to get to Andrew here because he puts out one of his questionnaires. Yeah, I love these questionnaires. I often don't participate in them, but they don't need me to participate in them. Um, let's see. There's a long grouping here where Andrew and McAttack just go back and forth with nonsense. So I'm not going to read any of that because it's not beneficial. But to the degree that I'm having to scroll this far to get past it, gives you some idea of how badly things got bogged down there. Here it is. All right. This is not his questionnaire. Okay, this is the other post that I wanted to address from Andrew, though. So I'm going to go ahead and read this one. Does he exist today? Well, Paul says he had a vision after the ascension. The body is missing. He said he would return. He has a special birth story. Quite fantastic stories are told about him. He spoke with authority about mystical issues. He's pretty popular. So you must be hyper critical if you don't believe, right? So that doesn't really warrant much more commentary than that. Thank you. Tyler put out a video of a man turning water into beer. Obviously an inferior miracle to turning water into wine. So nice try, Tyler. That person is clearly not Jesus. It's merely Jesus's apprentice. Tyler does try harder, though. He gives us some interesting commentary from Randall Rouser. I like Randall. There's a conversation largely between him and Bryan with an I. I did poke my nose into this one, though. It was about demon possession and how Jesus seemed to confuse demon possession and epilepsy, and how Randall took some heat for suggesting that maybe, not all of Jesus' demon exorcisms were really exorcisms. So you can see that I weighed in on the matter. If they were called demon possessions and they were really something else, then they're untrue stories, they're bad stories. They're promoting the idea of demons doing things when it's just people suffering natural illnesses. Bryan with an I suggested that, hey, whether it's demon possession or epilepsy healing, it's still pretty impressive, right? Well, I suppose if you could suggest that one of them had happened, but I would say it's not as impressive as you think. If you can't tell, you're the God of the universe, and you can't tell the difference between epilepsy and demon possession, then you're not a God worth following. You're just Loki, and so maybe you'll get healed and maybe you'll get turned into a rock. That's not the kind of God that you really want to worship, if that's what's going on. Of course, Bryan made the more nuanced argument that, hey, not every translator translates as demon possession. I mean, if you look at the Greek, yada, 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 and this is where I think all translation arguments just die a bad death. If we've got to look at the Greek and understand the Greek and original languages in order to know what this is talking about, then you're done. Because nobody does. Only a percentage of a percentage of a percentage of humans can do that. So if you're saying that our Bibles are bollocks, we're done. Darren does make the superior point, I think, that the argument is actually worse because the translators did know the original languages. They still got it wrong. So please don't come with me with, translation error. You didn't, you didn't get it right. So I've zoomed past Andrew's questionnaire and I'm going to zoom back up because I'm going to find it because I want to talk about it real quick. No, by the time I talk about this, Andrew probably will wish that I hadn't because, but let's see. Let's see if I can talk about it without pissing him off too much. Although, honestly, pissing him off is more fun. It's kind of like twisted idea of fun. Let's see. No, that's not it either. I had it and it's gone. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick edit here and I will see if I can't get it back. Okay, and I'm back. Sorry about that. So discuss is kind of weird sometimes, and I have an interesting technical issue that makes it even more weird, but there's no reason to talk about that. I've got it. So it's the what would Jesus do questionnaire. There are some interesting responses to this. I'm not going to deal with the responses. I'm just going to deal with the questionnaire. So the what would Jesus do thing caught my eye because in the same reason, you'll recall when I gave Andrew an opportunity to speak for the first time on the conversation that we had about mythicism, his comment was basically, I don't care. Because he doesn't care about mythicism. He doesn't care. In fact, he doesn't care whether Jesus was real or not. So it's not that he doesn't care about mythicism, which he doesn't. He doesn't care about the question of whether Jesus was real or not. So I get that, and I don't think he was trying to say anything particularly rude, but he doesn't care about the issue in the same way that I do. And the idea of what would Jesus do is one of those questions that I just don't care. I don't care what Jesus would do. I don't care. And I'm not trying to be rude either. We talk about this stuff all the time, so there's nothing new to either one of us. The reason I don't care about the question is, twofold. Reason number one, we have no idea what Jesus would do. We don't know. I don't know. You don't know. All you can do is make something up and pretend that you know that's what Jesus would do. You do not. So stop it. The second reason I don't care about the question is because it doesn't matter what Jesus would do. It simply doesn't matter. Jesus did things based on a first century Jewish context. Well, guess what? I'm not a first century Jew. So Jesus wouldn't eat pork chops. I would. Don't care. Doesn't matter. This is, by the way, how I felt. This is the same answer I would have given you as a Christian. What would Jesus do? I don't care. I'll even throw in a third reason. I'm not Jesus. So whatever he would have done is probably something beyond what I could have done. So it doesn't matter. I don't care. Culturally, the question is irrelevant. And just factually, on the basis that we can't know, the question is irrelevant. So just stop it. But, okay, what would Jesus do? I did tell Andrew that I would answer the questionnaire. I'm not going to write a post on it, though, so this is my answer. Would Jesus be in favor of good health care for all people? Now, I'm going to try to take this as seriously as possible, but before I do, wouldn't Jesus just heal the people that he wanted to be healed? I mean, we're talking Jesus, right? And Jesus is God, and he's got the power of God. Let's just say he has the same power today, because this is a modern issue. So let's say he has the same power today as he had, when he supposedly walked the earth before. When he just healed the people that he wanted to to heal or guide the hands of the doctors, as we pray today. So I'm not sure that health care for all people would have mattered to Jesus. Furthermore, I'm not sure that he would have wanted everyone to have all health care. What about the evildoers? Maybe some people needed to be punished. And maybe poor health was a part of their punishment. Did you think of that? So it's hard to transport this fictional Bible Jesus into the modern day and imagine him caring about an issue like healthcare for all people. His disciples could go and heal, and he could just tell his disciples, look, when you see someone that I want healed, they'll glow, a special glow that only you can see. Just go and heal them. That would seem to be a more powerful proof of his godhood than just, getting on some kind of political campaign for all health people. So I'm going to go with no. On the first question, already I feel like I've probably gotten it wrong. So, if no, why would he not? I think I've covered that. So the next one, would Jesus be in favor of a higher degree of self-determination? Hell no. Hell no. The last thing he wants is for you to have self-determination. You are the vessel that God made you to be. Right? So God shaped and molded you to be a particular kind of pottery. You might be a flower pot or a chamber pot. So a chamber pot, that's the one that rich people shit in, people, in case you're wondering. No, God wouldn't want you to have a higher degree of self-determination. He determines you. You don't determine you. And if you are determining you, then it sounds like you're not being content in the circumstance that God placed you in. So, no, and that's why I would give that answer. And the next question, would Jesus promote better education? Well, I had to think about this one for a minute, but I'm just gonna go with no. I don't think so. He didn't promote education when he was on earth the first time. The people who did have some education, he didn't try to work with them. He worked against them, tried to make fools out of them. And so, no, I don't think he would be promoting higher education. Besides, why do you need a higher education? What you need is to know Jesus and him crucified. What else do you really need to know? I mean, I don't love one another, right? What is higher education going to teach you that the message, the central message of Jesus doesn't? And so I think especially today, Jesus would be maybe even a little threatened by the idea of higher education. So I'm going to go with no. All that higher education could do is mislead you. Well, let's see. Would Jesus promote mankind's use of data-driven outcomes with measurable metrics, goals, and corrections? Okay. Now, Andrew, you've just gone from bad to stupid because you know that Jesus would not promote anything like that. There's no way. This is the guy who chided Thomas for wanting to see the holes in his hands and his side. This is the guy who says, better for them who believe without seeing than those who believe because they see. This is the guy who you think is going to want to promote mankind's use of data-driven outcomes and measurable metrics. Are you kidding me? So, no. No. There's one more there. I don't want to parody this question, so I'm not sure that I understand it. To what measurable degree, with examples, is there a transcendental truth that can be proposed that cannot be measured? So I don't know. Too many big words in there for me, I think. Sounds like he's making a more specific point to someone. So I don't think there is such a thing, if I understand the question. The idea of a truth that can't be measured. I can talk about the depths of my emotion for my wife. Now, I don't know if that can be measured or not. The depth of emotion, we can kind of measure whether you're having emotion or not. So, I'm pretty sure you can do that. But how strong is the emotion in a measurable kind of way? Well, even I can't measure my own emotion. I don't have a way. There's no metric that I can use. I'm really emotional, or I'm really really emotional, or I'm really 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 emotional. Is that a measurement? So, um, I don't know if that would qualify. So I'm going to say the answer is probably no. Um, and then I will let uh, Andrew explain himself. So there's some other things in here. I'll go back briefly to some of the conversation that's going on with Paul that I think is interesting. But jump in the board, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. Confessions of a Reluctant Mythicist, and read the comments and join in. Don't just read the comments, join in. Get in. The getting's good. So I'm in a conversation with Peter and others about Paul and his writings, and whether Paul was actually some kind of high-ranking Pharisee who had a lot to lose, or whether he's just a con man who had a lot to gain by lying. I have taken the position that I believe that Paul is a con man who had a lot to gain by lying and making up stories. I don't even believe that Paul was necessarily wrong. I think he was maybe wrong about some things, but I think largely he was a con man. Now, when I talk about Paul more directly, I will go into more about why I believe this. But needless to say, Peter thinks no. Paul's writings shows that he was very knowledgeable, highly educated, highly intricate and complex in his argumentation, and this shows that he was a highly educated Pharisee. And if highly educated, it automatically means that he would have had a high rank of some sort that would have been, he would have had something to lose by lying. Well, I feel like I debunked this pretty well. Darren also does so, just as well. So jump in there. Bryan with an I is in that skirmish. So rather than summarize the goings on in there, I would just say jump in, read some of the argumentation. Let's hear what you have to say, and there's some fun going on there. There was one other thing that I wanted to mention, and I forgot it now. So I think we might just have to leave it there. So the last post that I wrote. So I'm just gonna. I'll leave you with this one. Why did Jesus never write a book, or an epistle, or a gospel, or an apocalypse, or a collection of sayings? Why did Jesus never write anything? You think you've got a good answer to that. You do not. You do not have a good answer to that. So I left an original post on the board. I'll just mention that. Just shout out to that. So jump in there. This is not necessarily the only time that I will do this kind of I hate to call it a show. This is just me having a little bit of fun with the comments. Hopefully the next time I do this, I will have Bryan with a Y to help me out and keep me a little bit more organized. I really do enjoy the comment section. So thanks for everyone who participates. Mac Attack. Okay. It's not fair to say that he didn't make any comments on the show worth reading. He did make a comment. Once again, I do not have it highlighted here. But it was something to the effect, it was a comment to me. It says, if your blog post was a cheese, it would be of the Swiss variety. Yeah, here it is. If this blog post were a type of cheese, it would be of the Swiss variety. Thank you so much for that insightful commentary. If you have some insightful commentary that you would like to leave, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. If you want to email me, reasonpress at gmail.com. And Andrew will be glad to talk to you. Okay, guys, that's good for now, and we'll talk again real soon.